The city slept, a sprawling tapestry of muted lights and hushed breaths, oblivious to the meticulous ballet unfolding in its shadowed heart. Dr. Julian Vance moved with the precision of a surgeon, each action deliberate, calculated, devoid of hesitation. His hands, usually gloved in latex of the sterile confines of the forensics lab, now wore thin leather, offering a tactile connection to the cool, damp night air. The alley, a forgotten artery behind a bustling downtown district, offered the perfect stage. Its brick walls, scarred with graffiti and grime, absorbed the faint sounds of his work, a silent accomplice to his grim artistry. His victim, Thomas Albright, lay still, a discarded puppet on the grimy asphalt. Albright's mistake had been a casual, drunken insult directed at Vance in a bar earlier that evening, a fleeting moment of disrespect that had ignited a cold, intellectual curiosity in the forensic scientist. Not anger, never anger, just a challenge. Could he orchestrate a death so flawless, so utterly untraceable, that even he, the master of evidence, would be stumped? Vance worked quickly, efficiently. He had chosen his method with care, a swift, precise application pressure to the carotid artery, inducing a cardiac arrest that mimicked natural causes. No visible wounds, no struggle, no blood. He then meticulously positioned the body, arranging Albright's limbs to suggest a stumble, a fall, a tragic consequence of too much alcohol and an uneven pavement. He scattered a few empty beer cans, carefully selected from a nearby dumpster, around the scene. He even took a moment to wipe down the victim's phone, placing it carelessly in a puddle, ensuring any digital footprint would be erased by the morning dew and the inevitable police mishandling. His knowledge of forensic science was his greatest weapon. He knew the precise decomposition rates, the nuances of blood spatter patterns, the microscopic world of trace evidence. He understood how light affected a crime scene, how temperature influenced rigor mortis, how the human eye could be deceived by subtle misdirections. He was not just committing a murder. He was crafting a narrative, a meticulously constructed lie designed to be swallowed whole by the very system he served. As the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky in bruised purples and grays, Vance vanished, leaving behind a scene that screamed accidental death to the untrained eye and a chilling void of evidence to the trained one. He returned home, showered, and changed into his crisp lab coat-ready attire, his mind already shifting gears, preparing for the role he would play in the coming hours. The brilliant, unflappable Dr. Julian Vance, chief forensic investigator. The call came at 6:17 a.m. A jogger had discovered the body. Vance arrived at the scene, his face a mask of professional concern, his eyes scanning the alley with a practiced gaze. Detective Sarah Jenkins, new to the homicide division, was already there, her youthful face etched with a mixture of grim determination and a touch of awe as she watched the seasoned forensic team at work. She was sharp, Vance noted, perhaps too sharp for her own good. Dr. Vance, Captain Robert Miller, a grizzled veteran whose trust in Vance was absolute, greeted him. Another one, looks like a drunk, fell and hit his head, but the jogger said he looked arranged. Vance knelt beside the body, his gloved hands moving with practiced ease. He examined Albright's pupils, checked for signs of struggle, noted the absence of defensive wounds. Captain, the preliminary observations aligned with an accidental fall exacerbated by intoxication. No obvious signs of foul play. The arrangement is likely post-mortem shifting or the jogger's imagination. People tend to see patterns where there are none in these situations. He spoke with calm authority, his voice reassuring, his conclusions seemingly irrefutable. Jenkins, however, watched him closely. She was new, yes, but not naive. She had a knack for details, a quiet intuition that often pricked at the edges of established narratives. As Vance meticulously documented the scene, guiding his team with precise instructions, Jenkins noticed something, a small, almost imperceptible detail. A single, perfectly formed dewdrop clinging to the victim's left shoe, despite the fact that the rest of the alley, and indeed the entire city, had been dry for hours. It was a tiny anomaly, easily dismissed, but it nagged at her. Later that day, in the sterile, humming environment of the forensics lab, Vance was a maestro. He orchestrated the autopsies, the toxicology reports, the trace evidence analysis. He subtly guided his team, emphasizing certain findings, downplaying others. The official report, when it was finally compiled, was a masterpiece of misdirection. Thomas Albright, accidental death, cardiac arrest due to acute alcohol poisoning, exacerbated by a fall. Case closed. Jenkins, however, couldn't shake the image of that single dewdrop. She reviewed Vance's report, meticulously cross-referencing every detail. Everything seemed to fit, every conclusion supported by the evidence. Yet, that dewdrop, it was a tiny illogical pinprick in an otherwise perfect tapestry. She approached Vance in the hallway, clipboard in hand, a polite but persistent question on her lips. "Dr. Vance, about the Albright case. I noticed a dewdrop on the victim's shoe, but the ground was dry, and the weather reports indicated no dew formation that morning. It just seemed odd." Vance turned, a charming, disarming smile on his face. His eyes, however, held a fleeting spark of something cold, something predatory. "Ah, Detective Jenkins, your keen eye is commendable. A minor anomaly, easily explained. Perhaps a leaky pipe from an overhead window, or residual moisture from a previous night's condensation. In the grand scheme of things, a single dewdrop is hardly indicative of foul play. Wouldn't you agree? We must focus on the overwhelming evidence, not isolated curiosities." He patted her shoulder, a gesture of paternal reassurance that felt oddly condescending. "Don't let your imagination run wild, detective. Stick to the facts. The facts point to an accident." Jenkins nodded, a polite smile plastered on her face. But inside, a seed of doubt had been planted. Vance's explanation was plausible. Yes, but his dismissive tone, the way his eyes had lingered on hers for just a fraction too long, had not gone unnoticed. She felt a prickle of unease, a nascent suspicion that something was profoundly wrong. The perfect crime, she realized, might just be too perfect. And the man who had declared it so, the brilliant Dr. Julian Vance, suddenly seemed less like a colleague and more like a carefully constructed enigma. The game, she instinctively knew, had just begun, and she was, unwittingly, a player in it. The city, still sleeping, remained unaware of the unseen hand that guided its shadows and the quiet, observant detective who had just begun to notice its subtle, chilling touch. Her intuition, a quiet but insistent voice, told her something was wrong. It wasn't a gut feeling, but a logical deduction based on an anomaly. She knew better than to challenge Vance directly without more concrete evidence. He was a legend, a pillar of the department. To question him would be to question the very foundation of their investigative process. But she couldn't let it go. The image of Vance's calm, almost serene face at the crime scene, juxtaposed with that single inexplicable dewdrop, had etched itself into her mind. She decided to start small. A quiet, unobtrusive review of Vance's previous cases, focusing on those deemed accidental or suicide. She requested the files under the guise of familiarizing herself with the department's historical data, a plausible excuse for a new detective eager to learn. The archives, a dusty, dimly lit labyrinth of paper and microfiche, became her sanctuary. She spent hours poring over the reports, her eyes scanning the meticulous prose, the detailed diagrams, the seemingly irrefutable conclusions. At first, she found nothing. Vance's work was, as always, impeccable. Every conclusion was supported by a mountain of forensic evidence, every alternative theory systematically dismantled. But as she delved deeper, a subtle pattern began to emerge. not a pattern of evidence, but a pattern of absence. In several cases, crucial pieces of evidence that might have pointed to foul play were either missing, deemed inconclusive, or explained away with a level of certainty that seemed, in hindsight, almost too perfect. There was the case of the wealthy socialite who had supposedly drowned in her bathtub. Vance's report concluded it was a tragic accident, citing the presence of alcohol and prescription drugs in her system. But Jenkins noticed a tiny discrepancy in the water temperature logs, a detail that Vance had dismissed as a clerical error. Then there was the case of the young journalist who had apparently jumped from a bridge. Vance's analysis of the trajectory and impact patterns was flawless, but Jenkins found a faint, almost invisible bruise on the victim's wrist in the autopsy photos, a mark that Vance had attributed to post-mortem lividity. These were not glaring errors, but subtle anomalies, tiny cracks in the facade of perfection. They were the kind of details that only a mind as meticulous as Vance's could orchestrate, and only a mind as observant as Jenkins's could detect. She began to compile a secret file, a shadow dossier of Vance's perfect cases. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground. If Vance discovered her investigation, he could easily destroy her career, or worse. He was a master manipulator, a man who could turn the very evidence she sought against her. But the thrill of the chase, the intellectual challenge of unraveling the perfect crime, had taken hold of her. She was no longer just a detective. She was a hunter, tracking a predator who hid in plain sight, cloaked in the authority of science and the trust of his peers. The game had evolved from a nascent suspicion to a silent, deadly duel of intellects. Vance, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the storm gathering on his horizon. He continued his work with the same chilling efficiency, his confidence bolstered by the success of the Albright case. He felt invincible, a god among mortals, manipulating the threads of life and death with impunity. He began to plan his next masterpiece, a crime even more elaborate, more audacious, a true testament to his genius. He selected his victim with care, a prominent local politician whose death would send shock waves through the city, a canvas worthy of his dark artistry. He spent weeks studying the politician's routines, his security detail, his vulnerabilities. He designed a method of execution that would mimic a rare, untraceable medical condition, a stroke of brilliance that would leave the medical examiners baffled and the police chasing shadows. He anticipated every variable, planned for every contingency, ensuring that his hand would remain unseen, his presence undetected. The night of the murder, Vance moved with the same silent precision as before. He bypassed the security systems, infiltrated the politician's home, and administered the lethal dose with a steady hand. He watched as the light faded from his victim's eyes, feeling a familiar surge of cold, intellectual satisfaction. He then meticulously arranged the scene, planting subtle clues that would point the investigation towards a political rival, a false narrative designed to consume the department's resources and attention. The next morning, the city awoke to the news of the politician's sudden death. The precinct was in an uproar, the pressure to solve the high-profile case immense. Vance, as always, was at the center of the storm, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the frantic energy around him. He guided the investigation with a steady hand, his analysis of the scene pointing inexorably towards a false narrative he had constructed. Jenkins watched him, her eyes narrowed, her mind racing. She saw the subtle manipulations, the carefully placed evidence, the masterful misdirection. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that Vance was the architect of this tragedy. But she also knew that she had no proof, no concrete evidence to challenge his authority. She was a lone voice against a chorus of consensus, a novice detective challenging a legend. She retreated to her desk, her shadow dossier open before her. The pattern was clear, the anomalies undeniable. But how to prove it? How to expose the unseen hand that guided the city's darkest secrets? She needed a mistake, a flaw in Vance's perfect design, a tiny, seemingly insignificant detail that he had overlooked. She needed her own dewdrop, a piece of evidence that could not be explained away, a thread that, if pulled, would unravel the entire tapestry of his deception. She would not rest until the truth was brought to light, even if it meant confronting the darkness within her own department. The shadows of the city held secrets, and she was determined to unearth them, one anomaly at a time. The game was on, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. The unseen hand had made its move, and now it was her turn. The city, a sprawling canvas of human lives, continued its rhythm, oblivious of the silent war being waged within its heart. But Sarah Jenkins, with her quiet resolve and her unwavering gaze, was about to tear down the illusion piece by meticulous piece. The perfect crime was about to meet its match. The unseen hand, so long hidden in plain sight, was about to be exposed.
If you have a strange experience or a story you can't explain, leave it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories waiting to be told. Until the next video, stay safe.